Dubai is an iconically wealthy city, but its wealth is built on vulnerable foundations. And right now, those foundations are facing a potential crisis due to the growing instability in the Strait of Hormuz.
Revolutionary Guards of Iran have declared the Strait of Hormuz closed until further notice.
And as you're about to see, the possible solution Dubai is now considering is nothing short of extraordinary. The city owes much of its success to Jebel Ali, one of the largest and most important container ports on Earth. It connects Dubai to factories in Asia, to customers in Europe, and to supply chains spanning almost every continent. But here is the vulnerability. Every ship entering or leaving that port must first pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Having to rely on a narrow gateway outside of its control is a risk Dubai has been able to manage for decades. But now, escalating conflict has transformed the risk into an immediate and serious threat. Ships have been attacked, traffic is disrupted, and the trade routes supporting one of the wealthiest cities in the world have suddenly begun to look dangerously fragile. So, faced with seemingly no other choice, Dubai is turning to radical propositions. And perhaps the most radical of all is to simply build a new port altogether. In this episode of Looking For, we'll be traveling to the opposite side of the United Arab Emirates, beyond the Strait of Hormuz, facing directly into the Gulf of Oman, where a potentially transformative new port could give Dubai something it has never truly had before: its own front door. Dubai's predicament comes down in large part to its peculiar geography. The city, like most of the United Arab Emirates, sits inside the Persian Gulf, a long, enclosed body of water with only one natural exit to the open ocean. At its narrowest point, that exit, the Strait of Hormuz, is just 33 kilometers wide, separating Iran to the north from Oman's Musandam Peninsula to the south, and there is no alternative maritime route. Any ship sailing between the port of Jebel Ali in Dubai and markets beyond the Gulf must pass through the same narrow corridor. Inbound container ships carrying food, electronics, and construction materials use it. Outbound vessels carrying manufactured goods and petrochemicals use it. So do the tankers transporting enormous quantities of oil and natural gas across the region. In 2024, approximately 20 million barrels of oil pass through Hormuz every day, equivalent to around 1/5 of all petroleum consumed worldwide. On top of that, nearly 1/3 of the world's liquefied natural gas trade also passes through the strait. That extraordinary importance has traditionally helped keep the passage open. Closing Hormuz for any prolonged period would damage the economies of almost every Gulf state, disrupt Iran's own trade, send energy prices soaring, and risk provoking a major international military response. For Dubai, this made Hormuz dangerous in theory, but dependable in practice. Iran could threaten the shipping, seize individual vessels, or temporarily increase the cost of insurance. Regional tensions could rise and fall, but the economic consequences of completely shutting the passage were so enormous that global trade continued moving through it one way or another. However, due to recent and ongoing events, all that has changed. As conflict has intensified, ships have been attacked, traffic has been disrupted, and the impact of a serious interruption has become much harder for Dubai to dismiss. That underlying vulnerability, always there, yet always too distant to warrant real concern, is distant no more. For Dubai, the consequences could be enormous. Jebel Ali handled 15.5 million shipping containers in 2024, alongside millions of tons of machinery, vehicles, construction materials, and other cargo. This makes Jebel Ali the largest port in the Middle East and one of the 10 largest container ports in the world. If ships could no longer reliably reach it, Dubai would not simply lose access to a port. It would risk severing one of the main arteries through which its economy is supplied and connected to the world. Which leaves the city facing an extraordinary question. What if the only solution is to build another gateway altogether? Dubai's answer lies on the opposite side of the United Arab Emirates. On July 22, 2026, Dubai-based port operator DP World announced a broad agreement to develop 2 new terminals in Fujairah on the country's eastern coast. Unlike Jebel Ali, these facilities would sit outside the Persian Gulf, facing directly onto the Gulf of Oman. Ships arriving from Asia, Africa, or Europe could therefore reach them without passing through the Strait of Hormuz at all. Fujairah is already one of the world's largest bunkering hubs. serving as a major refueling stop for ships traveling between Asia, Europe, and Africa. The main project will be built at Al Rughaylat, near Fujairah city. Designed as both a container and multi-purpose terminal, it's expected to handle up to 2.5 million 6-meter equivalent containers each year, along with 1.7 million metric tons of general cargo and the equivalent of around 190,000 vehicles. Farther north, a second terminal at Dibba will add capacity for another 3.6 million metric tons of general cargo annually. The terminals will be developed in phases over approximately 24 to 30 months under a proposed 50-year agreement between DP World and the Fujairah Ports Authority. In combination, DP World's container capacity in the UAE is expected to increase by nearly 15% to an annual total of 22 million TEUs once both terminals are in operation. This means Dubai would not only have a new front door to the outside world, but one with a greater capacity than all but a few ports in the entire world. Al Rughaylat alone would have almost 1/6 of Jebel Ali's current container throughput. It could receive not only essential imports during a crisis, but vehicles, machinery, construction materials, and millions of containers moving through the UAE's wider trading network. Most importantly, it would place a substantial piece of Dubai's port system beyond Hormuz for the first time. However, eyeing the map, we can see there is one rather obvious complication. Fujairah may offer direct access to the open ocean, but it lies more than 100 kilometers from Dubai, separated from the country's largest commercial centers by desert and by the infamously challenging Hajar Mountains. Some of the mountains rise to more than 3,000 meters above sea level, forming a formidable natural barrier between Fujairah and the rest of the UAE. These are the same mountains that form the central obstacle for Dubai's other, arguably more radical proposal, the Union Strait, which we covered in a previous video. This too seeks to bypass the Strait of Hormuz for the same fundamental reasons via an ambitious plan to cut an entirely new shipping canal right through the Musandam Peninsula. And, as we explained in greater detail in that video, carving a ship-sized passage through this terrain is not impossible, but it would be an engineering challenge on an almost unimaginable scale. By contrast, this new port plan takes a comparatively far more conventional approach. The Union Strait is basically attempting to move the ocean itself, so ships can sail into Dubai without passing through the Strait of Hormuz. On the other hand, building a new port that's already outside of the Strait of Hormuz to begin with seems to make more intuitive sense, but it still has to contend with the inhospitable and unforgiving mountain range. A container arriving in Fujairah would need to be lifted from the ship, placed onto a truck or train, carried across the Hajar Mountains, and delivered into the warehouses, industrial zones, and distribution networks that have grown around Jebel Ali. Every additional transfer adds time, cost, and another potential bottleneck. And during a major disruption, this corridor might need to handle a substantial share of the food, machinery, construction materials, vehicles, and consumer goods normally arriving through Dubai's existing port. So, for Fujairah to function as Dubai's new front door, the UAE must also create a land bridge behind it, one capable of moving enormous quantities of cargo quickly and reliably from the open ocean back to the city. Fortunately for Dubai, the foundations of this land bridge already exist. The UAE has spent years developing roads, freight infrastructure, and logistics hubs capable of moving cargo between its ports and industrial centers. More importantly, Etihad Rail now operates a national freight network connecting major ports and economic zones across the country, including facilities on both sides of the Hajar Mountains. DP World has also demonstrated that large quantities of cargo can be diverted over land during maritime disruption. Its existing bonded corridors allow containers arriving at eastern gateways to travel directly to Jebel Ali without undergoing the full customs process at every stage. The proposed terminals would expand this system dramatically. Instead of treating Fujairah as an isolated port, DP World plans to connect it with Jebel Ali through an integrated inland logistics corridor. Cargo could arrive outside Hormuz, cross the UAE by truck or train, and then enter the same warehouses, free zones, and distribution networks that already make Dubai a global trading hub. Etihad Rail's national network became fully operational for freight in 2023. Extending roughly 900 kilometers across all 7 emirates. For the first time, all 7 emirates are connected by a single national freight rail network through the UAE's new Etihad Rail project. The line runs from the Saudi border in the west to Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman, with freight facilities serving both Fujairah Port and Jebel Ali. Its fleet was designed to carry as much as 60 million metric tons of goods annually. In theory, that creates exactly the route Dubai needs. Containers could be transferred from ships onto trains on the east coast, carried through the Hajar Mountains, and delivered directly into the port and industrial system surrounding Jebel Ali. But rail will not carry everything. Trucks will still be essential for moving containers between terminals, warehouses, factories, and final customers. DP World recently added 700 trucks to its regional fleet and opened fast-track bonded corridors that allow diverted cargo to cross by land without repeatedly stopping for customs clearance. For what it's worth, you could also argue the system has already been rather strongly pressure tested. Following the disruption at Hormuz, DP World says it rerouted more than 350,000 6-meter container equivalents over land through alternative ports and corridors. That is a substantial emergency operation, but still only a small fraction of the more than 15 million container equivalents Jebel Ali handles in a normal year. So the infrastructure exists. It just needs expansion. That's a huge advantage compared to starting from scratch, but it's a far cry from a guarantee that this desert overland route will be able to carry the burden of one of the largest ports in the world. And even then, Fujairah would still not truly replace Jebel Ali. Over more than half a century, Dubai's original port has accumulated an enormous ecosystem of warehouses, factories, free zone businesses, customs facilities, and shipping services around it. Recreating that on the opposite coast would take decades. The real purpose of the new terminal is therefore not replacement so much as resilience, giving Dubai a backup route when Hormuz can no longer be trusted. Having said that, however, the project is also ultimately part of something much larger, an attempt by the United Arab Emirates to engineer its way around one of the most important geographic vulnerabilities on Earth. And it's not the first time it's done so. The country has already done this once with oil. Back in 2012, it commissioned the Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline, linking the country's oil fields directly to Fujairah in order to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. The 406-kilometer pipeline carries crude oil from Abu Dhabi's inland oil fields to Fujairah, allowing as much as roughly 1.8 million barrels per day to reach the open ocean without entering the Strait of Hormuz. During the recent disruption, that pipeline preserved approximately half of the UAE's pre-war oil exports, even as most normal Gulf shipping was brought to a near standstill. The UAE is also currently accelerating construction of a second pipeline. It was reported to be about halfway complete in May 2026, and it's intended to double the country's crude export capacity through Fujairah once it begins operating in 2027. It could easily be argued that the new port in Fujairah is a continuation of that same broader effort, and that effort, in a nutshell, is towards something fairly radical. Fundamentally redrawing how the United Arab Emirates connects to the world around it. Ultimately, there is more at stake here than just protecting the country from a potential crisis, although that is naturally the immediate priority. The UAE has spent decades presenting itself as a place where geography can be overcome through ambition, where deserts become cities, artificial islands rise from the sea, and an isolated Gulf coastline becomes a center of global trade. But Hormuz is a reminder that some geographic constraints are harder to escape. No matter how advanced Dubai becomes, much of its connection to the outside world still depends on events it cannot control. And the new terminals, along with pipelines, cross-country freight networks, and daring canal proposals, are all attempts to change that relationship. Today, the UAE functions as a collection of cities facing inward toward the Persian Gulf. If successful, however, it could be something quite different in the future. With its coastlines infrastructurally bound into a single economic system, and with Fujairah becoming a second center for trade, industry, storage, and logistics. If this new system succeeds, the UAE will essentially have changed what its challenging geography means. Dubai's commercial reach would extend through the mountains to the Gulf of Oman, while the Eastern Emirates could take on a far larger role in the nation's future. The project will not make the UAE invulnerable, but it could make the country much harder to isolate and ensure that one narrow passage no longer has the power to decide whether its economy remains connected to the world. And in the end, that may be the true significance of Dubai's new front door. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to check out our video about the Union Strait, an even more radical proposal to bypass Hormuz by cutting a new maritime route across the UAE. That's all for now, and we'll see you next time on Looking For.